my least favorite tendencies amongst online communities is to act like they're better than the discourse. Something wild will happen, like Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, and Dockside Extortion is getting banned on a Monday when no one even knew there was a ban of a strict announcement coming up for Commander, and it will cause a lot of chatter on social media. And then you'll get those people who are like, well, I'm not engaging in the discourse, or they'll do some sort of sarcastic post of like generic insert comment about the discourse here, and it just comes across as like, I don't know, I've done it in the past, and I think it makes me look arrogant, and I think it makes other people look arrogant too. It makes you look like you're too good for it. It also makes me laugh that if you're a content creator, or like a critic, or like a commentator within a space, people want to hear you talk about this stuff. We get into hobbies to enjoy both playing them, but also engaging with them online. It's part of the fun. Going to Reddit or Twitter, or messaging your group chat being like, whoa, shit, boys, wish I didn't buy that Crypt.
This sucks, man.
That said, there's the flip side of that. The people who milk and milk and milk the discourse for videos. People like me. That's right, today's video is on the same topic as yesterday's video, but it's expanding a point that I didn't really go that deep into. If you don't like that, I'm sorry. You can click off. If you do want to hear about Sol Ring and how I perhaps controversially don't want it banned, then keep on watching, baby. This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, so if you want to buy a whole boatload of Sol Rings, you can via the link in the description below. Use the code KENOBI at checkout to get 5% off your order, and you'll get one of these. It's PleasantKenobi versus the Army or Orcs of Darkness. Wait, no, Orcs of Darkness, Army of Orcs. Either way, it's an Orc army token where I've got a hand made out of milk, and I'm just there for a good time. They also pack each order with a little sticker, including this summoning sick, summoning tired, which is how I feel all the time. To get you up to speed, there's a whole video talking about the ban announcement and the issues around banning out $400 worth of cards from people's collections and online retailers and stores. That video will be linked in the end cards, the description of this video if you want to hear a whole breakdown of the whole like financial implications of it all and just the issues we have with Wizards of the Coast designing super staples that then end up needing to be banned later down the line. Like I said, Crypt was in there. And part of the rationale for Crypt and Dockside getting banned and Lotus, well, all of it's fast mana buying the Nadu, right? But the reason for this, the explanation was that fast mana is one of the issues with contemporary Magic. And this has led people to ask the question about the elephant in the room, which is what they called it. How can we throw Mana Crypt in the bin but keep Sol Ring around? Sol Ring is just as good, if not better, than Mana Crypt. There is at first glance a lack of consistency there because Crypt and Sol Ring are basically two sides of the same coin. They do the same kind of fucking thing. Now, to address the differences between them right up front, and then we can move on from it, of course, Crypt and Ring are slightly different. If we remove like the price tag and similar, the big important thing about Crypt is that it is free. It is 0 mana, which is a problem in most formats, right? Free mana acceleration that is regular and ongoing is an issue, and you can understand why Crypt is so broken. There is a downside to it. It's not a strictly better version of Sol Ring, which it would be if it was just 0 mana for 2. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose a flip, it does 3 damage to you. So over time, it will deal damage to you. Over the course of a Commander game, it'll probably do a whopping 12 or 15 damage to you. Oh no. The downside is negligible, and that's why Crypt was an auto-include if you had the budget and you were playing at a higher power level. That's one of the issues here as well, is that Mana Crypt and Sol Ring on those list of cards that you just play if the people you're playing with are okay with you playing Cutthroat and you don't have a budget restriction. And there are other cards like that too. Command Tower, Arcane Signet, and there are some ones in colors too. I'm going to do a whole video on this, but the cards that I think are auto-includes that every deck should play. Dockside was one of them. If you're in red and you weren't playing Dockside, it was objectively incorrect if you were scaling to the top power levels. I also feel similarly about other cards at lower power levels. Smothering Tide, for example, I wouldn't expect to be seen in every CEDH deck, but I think it should be in most Commander decks. And that's a problem in and of itself. But anyway, back to the point. Sol Ring. It's an auto-include and it's fast mana, right? Well, let's look at the original rationale from them in the article. We should also talk about the elephant in the room. We're not banning Sol Ring and have no desire to. Yes, based on the criteria we've talked about here, it would be banned. Sol Ring is the iconic card of the format and sufficiently ties the identity of the format that it defies the laws of physics, weird wording, in a way that no other card does. Banning Sol Ring would be fundamentally changing the identity of the format. We aren't trying to eliminate all explosive starts. It's happening every once in a while is exciting, and removing the other 3 cards geometrically, weird wording, reduces the number of hands capable of substantial above curve mana generation in the first few turns. To clarify, they talk about with the fast mana from the cards that were banned, The explosive starts where you just get miles ahead in the first few turns. Where you untap on turns 2 and 3 with 5 or more mana, you cast your commander and have a protection spell. You double spell 2 things, including a Haymaker. This is a problem that they perceive to be growing in Commander as decks get more efficient, the threats get better, and cards get explicitly printed into Commander. Lotus being a good example of that, right? A card that enables these explosive starts the most. It's the card designed to allow you to cast your commander 3 turns ahead of when you should have been able to. Leaving the wood geometrically aside, I do really fuck with this rationale that there should be some explosive and interesting opening turns in Commander. I think having some fast mana is okay. The idea that when we're removing fast mana like Mana Crypt and Dockside Extortionist, that we need to nuke all fast mana from orbit, both the extreme stuff like Sol Ring, the slightly less extreme stuff like Grim Monolith, and then things like Mox Amber, Chrome Mox, and similar, which I did see people commenting on Twitter. I don't think that's right at all. It's good to have some fast mana. Removing parts of it allows you to reduce the chances of these obnoxious hands. I'm actually fully on board with that concept. There are other fast mana cards that might be up for consideration, Ancient Tomb being the one that immediately springs to mind. A card that over the first couple of turns of the game, in terms of setting up your mana and setting up your engine cards, casting your talismans and your signets or playing your Smothering Tides, Ancient Tomb is very good at getting you ahead early. But again, I think some of these things being left in the format is good. I think reducing the critical mass of them, especially when it comes to cards like Lotus itself that was printed into the format 4 years ago at this point, but reducing those things down is a good thing. However, the problem is that the writing of the explanation was a bit all over the place. There were some weird bits that probably needed an editor, like the use of the word geometrically. Is it a shape? Is it triangular? Is it square? And defying the laws of physics. Both of those things I got the vibe of, but they read more like a tweet than an article that's going to be read by easily thousands of people. But that explanation also talked about being iconic, which I think does rub people up the wrong way because that doesn't feel like the right way to balance a format. There's an argument that Commander is completely about vibes, and previously the ban list has been about sort of giving you an example of what to play with and what not to play with, but that goes out the fucking window when you're banning out huge competitive CDH sort of staples like Jeweled Lotus and Dockside. There is an active approach towards balancing out casual tables here that has been damaging to the CDH community. So if you are actively balancing, then you can't just say it's all on vibes. And that means that, iconic or not, that's not a good reason to keep something around. Or so some people would say. There's a weird thing here that I kind of get it. I think that Sol Ring is so much a part of the format's identity that I want it to be playable somewhere. And that somewhere can't just be Vintage or Vintage Cube, which is now where Mana Crypt has gone to rest its poor head. I think Sol Ring being playable in Commander is cool. I think Sol Ring is cool. I think it's a powerful, splashy card that allows especially newer players to get that feeling of power. I don't know if we need Crypt and similar things to evoke that too. And there's always that argument when it comes to discussing the balancing of Legacy, a format where the blue decks often are the most obnoxious ones. In recent time, it's been Blue-Black, Reanimator, and Psychic Fog. In the past, it's been Delver decks have always been the decks that picked up the latest broken thing, whether it be Luris or Oko or Uro or whatever new thing has come along and pushed the format and stretched it. Astrolabe, for example, as well. There's always this conversation around what do we need to ban out, and it's normally the new cards that get banned because no one wants to have the conversation about the format pillars and staples, things like Brainstorm, Daze, arguably Reanimate and Dark Ritual as well when it comes to Legacy, but Brainstorm and Daze are probably the best examples of it, but people will say they're pillars of the format, and what they really mean by that is it's iconic and people like to play with them, and thus they get to stay around, even though they're often powering up new cards to put them in to be banned. Same can be said for fetch lands in lots of formats too. Fetch lands do absurd things of pushing the power level of surge effects, top deck manipulation, landfall, mana fixing. I've done videos on it in the past, and I'll probably do more videos on it in the future about how good fetch lands are. Does it mean that they should be banned out from formats like Modern or Legacy, for example? No, I think they are just a part of those formats' identities and feels now. It was one of the greatest things they ever did going into Pioneer, was to differentiate it from Modern by making the fetch lands pre-banned. It was such a smart move, and I applaud it to this day. So it is iconic, and it is part of the format's identity, and I think that's a relatively... I don't want to say it's like a reasonable thing to say, but I do want to say it's valid. I think it should be said and should be discussed as part of what makes Commander Commander. Beyond that, people have been saying that Sol Ring skews games in ways that Dockside or Mana Crypt never did, and I think that's just bollocks. I think that Mana Crypt and Dockside were way more skewy. I think Mana Crypt being a free version of Ring is just an obvious example of it being better than Ring in a game of Commander, especially early on when you get a huge advantage from it. And Dockside is an abusable combo loop win con as much as it is a ritual on legs. But the other point I wanted to add to this sort of like talking point of like getting ahead and it breaking the game is that a Sol Ring very rarely dominates or wins you the game. Now that argument could be made for Mana Crypt and Dockside too, but hear me out here, right? The idea is that you're lessening the access to such obnoxious and powerful fast mana ritual style effects. But on average, a player playing a Sol Ring will not make them win. It will often make them the target and the threat. It will make them get dogpiled or cause politics at the table. People will make comments about an early Sol Ring and it will sway people on how they treat choices around attacks and use of interaction. And I think that's a wonderful part of the format that I want to keep alive and well. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I sometimes sandbag Sol Ring now if I don't think the advantage I'll get from it is worth it if it's going to bring a lot of hate to me at the table. So I have this thing as a creator where I either get to run hog wild and people like let me do what I want to do and it's not really a good thing, and I also get like huge amounts of scrutiny. There are two like default modes for a table. People let me go to Magical Christmas Land or they just fuck all over me. And playing the Sol Ring early is going to skew the table towards the latter, the bit that I don't want, right? I'm there to fly under the radar and be a mystical little pixie full of chaos. I really did finish my video about being evil in Commander. Then there's the accessibility argument, which is twofold, really. One is that this card is in every precon, barring one, but it's in every precon that everyone's ever bought, right? So, and thus it would invalidate a lot of product and make a lot of newbies unhappy, and I think that's also kind of a valid point to make. There's this argument that Pandora's box is already open when it comes to Sol Ring and we'll never put it back in. Like, Sol Ring is a broken Magic card, although its brokenness is subdued by the political aspect of a 4-player game. One broken mana rock will not get you ahead of 3 other players at a table. But back to the accessibility point, instead of labeling the politics point, yeah. People have this and it's cheap and it's in every precon, and I think that's cool. I think everyone having access to it is a good thing. There's a world of difference between a game getting taken over by a player who drops their Mana Crypt into a Smothering Tithe and people at the table are like, well, they've spent $200 on a Super Mana Rock and I can't afford that. And the alternative, which is one person at the table has drawn their $2 Sol Ring and everyone at the table wishes they had drawn their $2 Sol Ring. Those two things feel distinctly and miles apart and very different, especially to casual tables, which is what these ban announcements were aimed at, if we're honest. So I guess I'll summarize at this point. I think this video is going to be quite unpopular. I think a lot of people really wanted Sol Ring to go if Mana Crypt was. Some of that was the animosity of like, if I can't have fun, you can't either. But I think a lot of it was just more people wanting a fair and consistent ban strategy towards Commander. And in all fairness, we haven't had that for 10 plus years, so I'm not expecting it to start now. Is that like a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of thing? Am I just like giving up? But I think Sol Ring should be legal. I think it being the best fast mana available in Commander and having the similarly, arguably better version of it with Crypt getting banned is absolutely reasonable if you want to slow the fucking format down. I think the fact that it's accessible is good. I think the fact that it takes over games is absolutely exaggerated. And I think actually the iconic nature of Sol Ring has to be considered when it comes to whether or not it gets to live in this format. Like I said, I think a lot of people are not going to agree with this, and that's fine. That's part of conversation, right? But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you think Sol Ring should have gone? Do you think it's weird that it didn't go? Or do you absolutely understand and see the points that the Rules Committee and myself are making here? That Sol Ring being in the format just kind of makes sense. It feels right. It's a good vibe. Oh, Commander, the format where vibes are more important than the tournament results, I guess. That's pretty fair to say. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. Don't forget to check out CoolStuffInc.com. As a heads up, they actually had a policy that if you bought the cards that got banned in the last week or two, they were doing refunds and stuff. They're really, really good with their customer care and support, and I'm so glad and proud to say that they're a sponsor of this channel. Check them out in the description below. Use the code KENOBI at checkout. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.